Hello, 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 hello. It's good to see you. Say hello.
Welcome to the Huskies Hockey Podcast. We got the week of regionals in the books. So we got our Frozen Four teams all ready to head to the wonderful world of St. Louis. Or as the philosopher Nelly once said, St. Louis. But that is back in my era when Nelly had some dilemma. I'll tell you that much.
I think Bucci was saying the Lou. I think that's what the cool kids say now.
I'm from the Lou and I'm proud. It's a little more Nelly for everyone. Back in the day, I will let everyone know. Nelly was a top artist, and I'm known to still jam out to some country grammar, and happily, I might add.
Yeah, I think Nelly would take offense to you're framing this whole bit as if he's something in the past. I think he's quite relevant.
Is he still? God, good for him.
You bet.
And we're talking about the rapper and singer, not like Nelly Furtado, right?
Different Nellies.
Those are different, all different Nellies. So, underrated about Nelly, and I think I've actually said this on the podcast before because I don't know how many times I talk about Nelly. Heck of a bowler.
So is Mookie Betts.
Oh, really? That I did
Baseball
not know.
Star Mookie Betts.
Oh.
Ace bowler.
Yeah. St. Louis actually had one of the stronger bowling centers, and it's a very popular recreational activity in the St. Louis
you would
area.
know because you yourself, you're sleeping on your own skills here. You are an ace bowler yourself.
I wouldn't call myself an ace bowler. I miss bowling, actually. I don't go nearly as often as I used to, and I stopped going to leagues. Maybe I should get back into bowling league. I think I would like to be like just a sub, just be on like a call sheet and just kind of randomly show up. But only in handicap adjusted league. I'm not like good enough to go like to the big powerhouse leagues, but I would, let's just say if I throw under 200, I'm pretty bummed at myself.
Really? I was gonna say, is it 200 average? Are you cracking that, or sounds like you're a little out of practice.
Yeah, now I'm out of shape. So now I would, if I were to just like throw a set right now, I would probably get in like the 550s. So
I don't know all this this lingo. What's a set? How many games is that?
3 games in a set.
3 games. So 550. So a shade under, 180.
Yeah, 185, I would say, is probably what I would be throwing now.
Just $1.85. If I crack 100, I would be thrilled.
No, it's but now it's a big controversy. I mean, obviously we're going to start off our hockey show with bowling talk, but now it's a big controversy because people aren't going bowling, right? Not a shocker to a lot of people, which kind of surprises me because you could be on your phone most of the time anyway. So it feels like it would be like a very, drink beer, like a Gen Z type thing. But no, not the case. Bowling numbers are dwindling down, and the lanes are prone now. They're aging, prone to breaking down. And less companies are making the parts for the automatic pin setters. So now some centers are going to string bowling, where literally the pins are on strings. So it's just the same pins back there, but they're on strings. So, you throw it and it resets, you just tightens up all the strings, and then they're placed down again. So it doesn't have the same type of pin action going back and forth because they're connected onto strings. So a lot of people are upset about that, but at the same time, all the machines are breaking down. Times are tough for bowling alleys right now. Everyone get to a bowling alley. Which really I shouldn't, I said I don't go enough.
Bowling. If you have time to spare, strike on over to your nearest lanes.
So, but that's our bowling area. Maybe that's
talk.
You'll meet Ferschweiler on the lane next to you if you go in St. Louis.
Big bowler himself,
right?
Coach Pat Ferschweiler.
I would imagine if you were to pick between Ferschweiler and Carl, who do you think is the better bowler?
Ferschweiler's by far more of the bowling type.
More,
as they say.
Fair enough. So
Carl's got too much hair to be hanging around at a bowling alley.
That's your that's your prerequisite. That's the
criteria that I'm going on.
So I mean, as I used to be more of a bowler, and I am losing a lot of my hair. So maybe now the fact that a lot of it is gone, I could head out to the bowling alley.
Yeah, that's right.
So
it's calling you.
Yep. The lanes are calling me. Let's get back to it. So anyway, let's start off the show as we normally do now.
So we're talking about whiskey today.
Whiskey.
All right.
I always love that from Jason Bryant. Where are we drinking today?
Jason Bryant, hit us up. Let me know if you're a bowler. So
we're dying to know.
We can hit out the lanes. We can share a picture. I'm okay with that. We are actually in our first repeat country. We are going back. We got repeat countries.
This feels like it's against the rules.
I mean, a little bit.
Is it at least a country that you enjoyed drinking before?
No, it wasn't. It was one England,
Germany?
which is England was a 6-3. So I was not impressed with England the first time around. But this is a rye whiskey from England, so I'm interested in how much that's going to shake. How much that's going to have the difference. So on the nose, I really like it. It's got more of a floral, little bit of spice to it as well. So it's not too bad on the nose. So here we go.
Swirling the glass, knocking it back, pondering.
This one's a lot more complex than the first one. This one I like more. Not my favorite. It's not up there with the Australia or the Canada or the Denmark. But
and you generally like ryes.
I do. I found myself really liking rye whiskeys. The like I said, the spice of it, I think, is it's been enduring to me, to say the least. So this one I'll give a 7.2. 7.3.
Yeah, we're seeing like 7. Anything in the 7 range is noteworthy in a good way.
Yep, in a good way. So.
And a good rebound from last week, which I believe was the lowest on the board.
The New Zealand. That was the 5-2. That was the dud.
So good to bounce back.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
We're back into positive numbers.
We're back into solid whiskeys from around the world. So which I appreciate, and I'm sure the listeners do too, as my review.
They're taking notes. They've got two numbers, 2 ratings with England. It kind of screwed up everybody's spreadsheet to have two whiskeys from the same country, but I think they'll be able to manage that. And we always do like you updating. What number are we on now? How many has this been total? Do you have that on hand?
This is number 13.
And what was it? 24 total?
And it's 24 total. So we are
just over the halfway mark.
Yep. Officially now past the halfway mark. We're on the downhill.
And we're going to be transitioning into more monthly shows rather than weekly shows. So the bit will continue probably until next season starts. Mm-hmm. So continue following this bit, all 24 of you who are listening, because I know that you're You're riveted with this.
You're riveted. This is what you signed up for. Let's get to your hot portal action. As the portal for men's hockey opened up, and there was a flurry of people rushing to it, and 2 Huskies made the list. And I would say that one of them we're not too surprised with, and the other one kind of came as a much bigger surprise. So the one I think that we both kind of saw on the wall was Warren Clark, who at times was scratched throughout the year, and that kind of made sense that he would take his talent some elsewhere. But Colin Ralph was one that is the other one. So our defense is going to be taking a hit with these 2 now going to be taking their talents somewhere else. But Ralph was the one that really surprised me.
Yeah, not the best news to learn that, World Junior alum, drafted player I mentioned.
That's the part that like really surprises me.
Which part?
Like the fact that he was with Larson also in the World Juniors and took him with there, and I don't know, like. No, maybe something happened on that trip. I guess I don't know, but it was something that kind of surprised me that he would take his talents elsewhere.
Yeah, the story with the portal, as we've come to know it over its existence of 4 or 5 years now. The whole story sort of emerges once we know where the landing spot is. So I'm really crossing my fingers. There's rumors swirling, and Big Ten seems like a logical choice. If it's Denver, that would annoy me the most because of the World Junior aspect. With Carl has a track record of doing this. See Polkamp, Eric, which he plucked from Bemidji, and coincidentally, he coached him at the World Juniors last year as well. The gurus like McMahon remind us that these high-end guys, and I think he was lumping in Ralph in that category, drafted players in particular, if they're entering the portal, they know where they're going. Now, that hasn't been officially reported yet, but it's likely that he knows where his landing spot is. There's a whole other discussion there about tampering and morals and compliance with NCAA rules. It annoys me that these rules don't seem to be followed and almost like openly flaunted when players, like, there is something in the portal called a no contact. There was like a no contact radio button that you can select if you're entering the portal, which means, again, don't contact me because I already know where I'm going. That seems to be against the spirit of this whole thing, but that's a discussion for another day. So he knows where he's going. It just hasn't been reported as of Monday night when we're recording this. And that'll go a long way towards explaining the entirety of this move, because that makes a difference. Again, I'm hoping against Denver. I'm really hoping against anyone in the NCHC. And then anyone outside the NCHC, I'm especially not looking forward to seeing Motzko's name involved with this, i.e. Ralph going to the Gophers. But I'm almost bracing for the worst there. But I don't know. There's definitely, if you want to go St. Cloud news in general, or just specifically with portal and not just limited to St. Cloud, for anyone who's a fan of a team who's got players, and especially impact players in the portal, there's an easy way to go doom and gloom with this. And then on top of that, the pessimism of what I brought up was about the portal and the newfangled nature of college hockey and how it is really not anything resembling the college hockey that we grew up with and were familiar with. And is this really kind of the spirit of college athletics? There's an easy road to go down. And if you want to, there seems to be several other fans that will join you in the commiseration of those kind of feelings. You can also look at it, and you can try to look at it optimistically. I wouldn't classify myself as optimistic about this move, but there can be a way that you can think of this as Ralph being a second-round draft pick. If we didn't have the portal, second-round draft picks, we should be kind of happy however long they are here at the college level. I hate to bring up the name Dennis Cholowski because it's not like he was a star here for St. Cloud, but he's a first-round draft pick, and he lasted 1 year. That was pre-portal. Bolted to the pros at that point. And our not being very thrilled with Cholowski aside, again, I don't think that, and he was the first-round draft pick that St. Cloud had at that point, 2017. 16-17 was the one season that he played for St. Cloud. But at that point, you really almost like anything you can get. You can't expect certainly a 4-year career out of a player like that. We were thinking about more than one, obviously, especially after the underwhelming performance he put in. But a lot of these drafted players for, bigger name programs, Big Ten type programs, you get 1 year out of those guys. That's all that you can really expect. Obviously, with Ralph as a second-round draft pick, it's not exactly at that, like Logan Cooley status, for instance. But these guys weren't going to last forever anyway. Think of it as if this is easier to think of if he doesn't go to another NCHC team or a team that's not on St. Cloud's schedule next year. Just imagine as if he went pro. You got 1 year out of a second-round draft pick who's probably going to play in the NHL for a while. Like that's how his career seems to be projecting at this point. So that he's lost for another year in college hockey, and that second year of college hockey is spent elsewhere. Okay, it's a loss. I hate for it to happen, but we weren't going to have this guy for 4 years anyway. Am I crazy? I'm trying to put a positive spin on this, or at least soften the negativity surrounding this. Are you buying anything that I'm throwing out there?
I actually right away thought of Cholowski. Now, because it's 1 year, and you're expecting out of a 1 or 2 rounder that you're going to get 2 years out of them, kind of max. Maybe you can hope for a third if they're kind of maybe a step away, or depending on the organization that they're in. But yeah, I was just kind of thinking, man, I would like to have him for 1 more year. Now him in the portal again, we don't know why. And we're not going to sit here and speculate about why he's in the portal or where, or some of the reasons behind it. Cause remember, it is twofold. It can very well be, Larson side of it. It could be the player side of it. He could be unhappy here, or he could maybe got from his advisors. I will say that the rumors that I have seen circling around is that Michigan State has seemed to be the one that has been fed to me on the Twitter sphere by a couple of people. And those are all public on my timeline, so I'm not leaking any information or anything along those lines. And if it is Michigan State, or if it is a Big Ten school along those lines, to me, that kind of goes down to NIL money. And I think if you're looking at a player, maybe if, he really likes it here, he likes the situation that he's in, but he can go make money elsewhere, that is kind of a different conversation that we might need to have, that St. Cloud's not really in the position to offer. I don't think we'd be able to match a Big Ten school when it comes to that. So like I said, I'll have probably more to say if those rumors do end up coming true. But yeah, it's just, that would make a little bit more sense, but also to your talk about the whole tampering issue, and where there's not really really any enforcement that has been done yet. Now, this is still new and maybe something will come of it, but it seems like the method that goes about it is that an advisor will go ahead and send a feeler to a coach to say, hey, is there a player like blah, blah, blah that would fit into your place next year. Like we had, Perone, right, from North Dakota. He went in with the no contact button, and Schlossman has reported that he's known since February where he's going to go. So that's where like some alarm bells are kind of ringing off that, I think the portal's good. I like the freedom that the players have when it comes to that. They're not locked in or trapped to a certain situation. I do think, there is some things that we can do to improve it or try to improve it. It's never going to be perfect. But I think it's still kind of a work in progress, and we'll see where he ends up. And depending on where he ends up, I'll probably have a lot more to say where he goes. Like, because if it is a Big Ten school like a Michigan State or anything along those lines, it's going to be a little bit easier for me to swallow. And it's going to be like, well, there's nothing we can really do to combat that where St. Cloud State is in. Now, if you want to change that, open your checkbook. And I'm not saying that just to the administration. I'm saying that to Husky fandom as well, because we're going to have to start really donating. Now, I don't know if we have anyone to send in a $1.3 million check yearly, like Northern Michigan apparently does.
Lake State.
I'm sorry, like Lake State apparently does. But if MacGyver can rig up his wallet with gum and a paperclip, maybe he could kick some money to St. Cloud State for it. But that's kind of where my thoughts are on Ralph. It's a bummer, but also if he does end up going to Michigan State, it is maybe karma for us bringing up Isaac Howard so much and Dan Jacobson. So now Dan Jacobson can go ahead and rub it into our face. So that's fair, I guess.
Yeah, Ralph, we're mentioning, was on the World Juniors, but I don't believe he had any. He didn't have. He was from Shattuck. Did he have any national team development program experience? Because that's where Nightingale came from for Michigan State a couple years ago. So even if I'm looking at Ralph. He dabbled in the USHL, but no NTDP experience. So there wouldn't be any sort of connection that he's trying. Like he's met Nightingale at functions through USA Hockey. And so that could be another factor as well, but it doesn't look like they would have crossed paths before, at least in an official context. Yeah, if it's money, the obvious next discussion you would have is, well, St. Cloud ain't got a lot of money, and they're going to be on the losing end of a lot of these types of portal moves in the future. So does that mean that St. Cloud either shouldn't go after such guys, or again, comes back to my first point of just be grateful for the year that they were able to spend here and then chase the money bag for any additional years of college after that? This might be one of those discussions that Larson and company need to have is, are we going to put our chips in the bag of drafted players? And we've had this discussion kind of on and off throughout this season about the importance of drafted players when it comes to recruiting and how it relates to success, team success at the NCAA level. And then also like the recruiting aspect from a coach's record, developing drafted players to the NHL. Is that something that you can judge coaches on? Larson's track record, at least at St. Cloud, has not been good when it comes to developing draftees. 0 NHL games played by recruits from Larson in his time at St. Cloud, recruits that he himself has brought into St. Cloud. He has coached players at St. Cloud like Nick Perbix, who were recruited by the previous regime that have gone on to NHL experience. And Larson has recruits in his Duluth days that are in the NHL. But at least in his, 6-7 years now that he's been at St. Cloud, that track record hasn't been very good. And with these two portal entrants, with Ralph and Clark both being drafted players, you can perhaps put that in that folder of maybe to the minus column on Larson's report card when it comes to his time here in St. Cloud.
I'll kind of push back maybe a little bit on that.
Please do.
Just like I just feel I get that sentiment. I just feel that there's still even 6-7 years. I don't feel like that's really enough time to judge unless you're getting strictly first and second rounders, which of course St. Cloud's never going to, or is not in a position to do. Like, I would understand that if it was like, if it was Larson under a banner of a Minnesota or a North Dakota or Michigan, that they're able to get these top recruits year in and year out. But St. Cloud State has always gotten lower rounded drafted players, and some of them have panned out, some of them haven't, but it would take years to develop, and you throw in COVID in there that kind of screwed in everything as well for a couple of years. I don't think enough time has passed when it comes to it to see exactly where they're going, to see if they've developed well enough under his tutelage.
I'm not really talking about us like we're analyzing it. I'm talking about players that are drafted that are choosing St. Cloud to play for Larson. Like, do players like Colin Ralph think that their pro prospects are being developed to the best they can be at the college level under Larson's tutelage? Because again, you look at players like Ingram's a good example. Like, his development seemed to go off a cliff this year. Now, we don't know what the reasons are for that. It could be injury related, could be a lot of different reasons that aren't impugning the abilities of the coaching staff. But that could be also another possible explanation for such a dip like that. Again, I'm not going to go on a hot take here and say that it is all Larson's fault here, and this is a bad mark against him. I'm just saying it could be a potential factor for recruits in the future. They're going to make that decision to play for St. Cloud. And you also have to wonder, is this 8th place season, how much does that in particular, just the most recent season that the Huskies have had, how poor it turned out to be, is that like if the Huskies were 4th place this year, hosted a playoff series, does Ralph still make the move that he makes? It will be interesting to see what the next move is. That's why I'd like to reserve a little bit of this discussion until we know where he ends up. I want to mention or touch on Clark a little bit too, though, because I was always a little baffled by his time here with St. Cloud. So they bring him in as what we thought was they brought him in a little early. He didn't have a full season of USHL under his belt. Canadian juniors. He's a kind of a late bloomer. When they announced the commitment, wasn't really on draft radar. He ended up being drafted by the Lightning in a late round draft pick. His commitment, or at least the announcement that he was coming in for the 23-24 season, was shortly on the heels of the developing, as we knew, Leah Gruba story. And I'm always wondering if Gruba's eventual decommitment and then bringing Clark in a little early, if those kind of two stories were tied at the hip a little bit. But anyway, he never really seems to play. He never really found a regular role with the Huskies, especially this year. 20 games played. I mean, he played the last couple of games of the year, last 2 series, he played both games, but for the majority of the season, he was playing 1 game a weekend. And there were some weekends that he didn't play at all. Never heard any injury news on him. So, which leads me to believe that his scratches, as frequent as they were performance related, not chalked up to any sort of injury. And I've mentioned it throughout the season, I don't know, 4 or 5 times, mentioning it's not like I was being wowed by Warren Clark, but I also wasn't seeing him as like a giant liability. And not only was he scratched almost half the games this year, but the games that he was playing, he was only putting in like 9 minutes of ice time, buried on the depth chart on a bad team, as it turned out, being scratched for guys like Caleb Tyson at the end of the year. And again, this was a player who I'm sure Larson would have preferred to have 1 full year of USHL experience under his belt before he was brought in. So you kind of bring him in early and then you sit him down for most of his time here. Not surprised at all that he left, but I'm not really sure exactly what the plan was with him. And I don't feel like he had a really fair shake and I'm not quite certain why. Do you have any insight or comment on that, or what's your take on Warren Clark as he's out the door now?
Yeah, I always there's been a couple people like that. I feel that just how Larson manages them is just a little bit odd to me. Like we can look at an Ocean Wallace, for instance, kind of in a similar instance where you bring him in, and then you take the red shirt off for only 2 games when you've had absolutely no luck scoring in the second half of the season at all. So but I do agree with your assessment here that you bring him in early just to sit him, and I don't think he was terrible out there, and he was green at some instances, but as we saw, I don't think the defense was a massive problem here for the Huskies. But you've got somebody who is does have some size to him at 6'3", nearly 200 pounds. That you can really grow into, and to see him not getting a little bit more minutes, is a little bit frustrating, which is why, it doesn't make any, or it's not really that much of a surprise that he's going to end up looking to see where his options are somewhere else. Now he's going to be another interesting one to see where he does kind of end up.
Yeah, he's probably the most
in kind of a
candidate.
different area or a different reason than Ralph.
Yeah, as I said, what would have been maybe the recap of the Western Michigan playoff series, like sort of the immediate post-mortem of the season. I figured he was the most obvious candidate to transfer out, and that he could get regular, probably top pairing minutes at any number of schools, CCHA most likely. And just trying to think if the weaknesses or why he wasn't able to crack the line. But you mentioned he's got size. He's not a very physical player. So I'm wondering if Larson was hesitant playing someone that, in the league that the NCHC is, which is a physical league, if he was overmatched that way. Again, I just don't feel like we got enough time on ice for him to prove one way or the other whether or not he's cut out for this league, much less if he's cut out for a future in NHL hockey, which seems like a long shot at this point, just based on his track record at St. Cloud. But wish him well, and like I said, feel like he's got an opportunity to go somewhere and at least play regularly and prove that he belongs at least at the NCAA level, because I certainly do think that he does. I do also want to just circle back, because we brought him up. Leo Gruba, watched him in the regionals, and watched the Gophers a handful of times this season. So it's good because last summer, or 2 summers ago, I guess, when the decommitment was announced, and him going back to Fargo for another year, which seemed redundant, which was weird. And we didn't know what was exactly happening. Nick Oliver leaves Fargo to go to Wisconsin. We're like, is that where he's going to end up going? He ends up going to the Gophers. He only puts up 3 points this season, 1 goal, 2 assists, but he played every game, all 40 games for the Gophers, and +7 if you still buy into the plus minus stat. He seemed like he was not a liability, and buried on a depth chart there with the Gophers, guys like Rinzel and Chesley, basically a third pairing defenseman, which he'll move up on that depth chart with those guys leaving. So, I mean, not the point production that I'm sure Gopher fans were expecting, but he didn't really need to provide offense based on the role that he was in. No power play time. That's where he sort of flourished with Fargo. So obviously you can't translate 3 points with the Gophers as a third pairing defenseman. And his roles, we saw like Ralph getting power play time towards the end of this season. Gruba's probably would have had some more opportunities like that here. But if fans are curious on what we could have had, that was Leah Gruba's season, his freshman year for the Gophers this past season. But yeah, it's the portal is what it is. I mean, I think that's the existential debate on whether or not it's good for the game and whatnot is maybe one for a summer podcast if we want to have it. But at least for at this time, which It's always different. You could be listening to this on Tuesday later this week, and we've already got more Huskies in the portal. At this point, after these two players go in immediately after the portal opens on Sunday morning. Nothing since then, which I guess is good news. No news is good news from when it comes to portal entrance. We'll obviously keep you updated, but at this point, 2 losses, and one, especially with Ralph, a big impact loss that we were hoping that we were trying to avoid those. But we'll see how this changes the rest of the offseason. And, potentially, so 2 defensemen of the 2 players, both defense, and thinking that offense is really the lagging aspect of the game this year. Defense, had weak spots. It wasn't the best defense either, but you'd think that and Larson sort of having an MO of being a defensive coach, maybe not the best sign that the first 2 entrants that we see here both play the point position. But that was not the only loss. With the portal's not the only way that you lose players. We also had another player say sayonara to St. Cloud. And there's my segue. Take it away, Mr. Host.
Yeah, in what I consider to be a surprise move, it kind of blindsided me. I didn't even think of it as a possibility, which I guess is my bad. But Isak Posch ends up signing a contract and turning pro in the Colorado Avalanche organization. So we have empty goalie, as we kind of looked at maybe Cocaine Bear as somebody who might get into the portal, maybe him going into a battle with Jan Stosak, who is right now in the USHL. He's going to be coming in, slated to come in here for next season. So I would imagine it'd be one of them two kind of heading up the pipes for the Huskies. But were you as kind of surprised as I was that that Posch ended up bolting for the pros?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was shocked, but definitely surprised. I do think it's a little early for him to leave. And it's weird for me. It's weird to think of it this way. Like our Herbies are on the horizon. Just a couple of weeks. We'll have nominations next week, and the show, what is that, the week after the Frozen Four is done, right? So second week in April, roughly. MVP, Posch is going to be a candidate for that, if not an official nominee. I will assure it. At least on the men's side, he was one of the most valuable players because we saw what his absence did to this team. So you can make the argument that he was the most valuable player on the men's team this year. But yet, and again, you can rake me over the coals for this one. I do think goaltending is the most replaceable position in hockey. That's not to say this isn't a big loss, but I do think that with Shostak coming in, I do think that they're going to be compelled to get someone else from the portal as well. Gray to me seems like he's maxed out as a number 2 goalie. I don't think he's a legitimate starting goaltender at the NCAA level. And he's probably best suited as a 3. And so I think that they should, at least I think they should be scouring the portal for goalie candidates to bring in. My ideal would be to bring in a 1 year guy, like a would-be senior, for next year.
Gavin Enright,
someone a step up from that. No offense to Gavin Enright, but someone who's had more success than Enright had at Bemidji, for instance. And I mean, there's plenty of goalies in the portal at this point. I mean, there's not a ton of high-end goalies to be had, especially when we're talking about juniors to seniors. Because I think that the plan should be, my idea would be like bring in a guy to potentially go halvesies with Shostak, maybe 2/3. Like do what Western Michigan did this year with Rowe and Slukinski, split the first half of the year, see which goalie emerges, and then ride with one guy at the end of the year into the playoffs like they did with Slukinski this year. So sell someone in the portal the opportunity to come in as a split time goalie to start the year with the opportunity to win the job if the team is threatening with the playoffs. And I think you'll be able to find someone in the portal that fits that mold. Because I do think Shostak's a good prospect. His junior track record is better than Posch's junior track record, you could say at this point. Posch crapped out is probably too harsh, but he went down a level from the USHL. I remember at the time it was like Sioux Falls. I think he was with Sioux Falls. Really sucked that year. That Posch was their goaltender, but his numbers were not very pretty. Put up very good numbers the level below in the NAHL, and then came into St. Cloud last year. And again, 36 games. I'm mentioning that I think Posch, this was a little early on his part. 36 games total across these two years. So that's basically one full season. You put it all together. And yeah, he's hurt for, 10, 12 games this past year. So obviously some of that was injury related. His first year, that was Dominic Bassi was the starter coming out of camp. Posch really didn't take over the job until the second half of 2020, the 23-24 season. And he started this year as the only goaltender until he got hurt. He played every minute. You could probably do this with every goalie, but I was looking at the splits that he had as far as the competition that he played. Again, the 36 games that he played, 17 starts against teams that qualified for the NCAA tournament, 19 starts against non-NCAA qualifying teams across these 2 years. In the starts that he played against NCAA qualifiers, .892 save percentage. In the 19 starts against non-NCAA tournament qualifying teams, a .932 save percentage. So he's really good against bad teams and not so hot against good teams. We saw that like last year got lit up by Denver on a couple of occasions. This year got pulled in a couple of the games against Western Michigan. Again, I think most goalies are going to have a similar split. It's just better competition. You're not going to be as good. But I feel like he needed to put in a full season at the college level before he was going to move on to the next level. If you're offered a bunch of money that I'll probably never, a kind of paycheck that I'll never see with the amount of zeros that I'm sure Colorado offered him, I don't begrudge him. I just think that from his perspective, he could have gotten as good of an offer with a solid full season under his belt, or even a better offer had he come back to St. Cloud for a third year. What do you think about that? I've been talking for a while.
No, I like you brought up some good points. And like you said, there's no shortage of goalies. And there's some of them also that I'm looking like, how much do you take a chance on as well? But I think, Shostak's going to be our guy, and I got to make sure I end up pronouncing it correctly. But, just kind of some names out in the portal that have fairly decent stats when it comes to it. But, they're also going to be maybe a little bit unproven or a little bit of a unknown when it comes to it. The one that kind of stuck out to me was from Omaha. Who was the backup for Latkozy. And
Kevin Radler.
Yeah.
Latkozy announced that he's coming back for next year, which I'm sure played into Radler's decision to enter the portal.
And with him being a draft pick as well, just, 920 save percentage, 274 goals against, Ottawa 5th round pick. That's somebody that I'm kind of looking at that, maybe you there's a chance now that's a little bit younger. I mean, he came as a freshman, so he'll be a sophomore. So maybe that's a little bit more of a time frame than you're kind of looking for at this point. But also at this point, you're going to want to get the best guys that you can. So I'm not too concerned about that aspect of it. Just get the best goaltenders that are available. But, with that portal option, we're not the only team going through it, losing some guys. And, even like the North Dakota fans, like I said, with Perone and also McLaughlin as well, that are in the portal. It's a kind of a situation where even the top programs are losing, historically top, like when it comes to, those types of teams. And it's a situation where everybody's going to be going through it. There's going to be some ebbs and flows, and we just want to make sure it's a net gain on our side every time that every year passes by. Even if it's a small net win, we're going to have some holes to fill, especially on defense. And, we also would like to get a little bit more scoring. We'll see where everything kind of shakes up. But, Connor Halsey from Bentley. Bentley gave, I thought, a really hell of a game. But 925 save percentage, 196 goals against for him. So there's options out there, and that's going to be on Larson and company. And this doesn't even include all of the CHL that is now open for game 2. That is where it's going to be a lot of, we can look at it as, us going to be feeder teams for, if, other teams come in with massive NIL deals. But, where college hockey is right now, there's not a lot of teams for how much talent is out there to get. So it's really going to be up to the coaching staff to find it all from anywhere that they can. And we see different coaches on different sides of it going out completely different ways. Gabnet has gone really head first into the CHL for recruiting and getting some guys in. So it'll be, kind of fun to watch to see how some of those guys operate. And if some of the CHL guys do make some splashes, you're probably going to see a lot more recruits from them. And then you'll see a lot more blue bloods complain that these guys are too old and they shouldn't be able to. And then we'll have that argument again. Everything's cyclical is all I'm trying to say. And this is all a new, before it was a facilities arms race, and now it's an NIL race. And it's, after that, it's going to be something completely different.
Yeah, I'm just kind of circling or scanning the portal sheet here in cleansheethockey.com.
Shout out to Sydney Wolf.
Yeah, a guy like Radler, who I saw in person this year, 6'6" goalie. He's got the Dominic Bassey size. Slight geez. Him with.
Okay, never mind. Scratch that. Not him.
But as a freshman, I don't know about bringing a guy, and I don't want to go down the North Dakota road. And we'll get to North Dakota here in a little bit, but getting into this mode of we need to every year go in to get one guy out of a goalie out of the portal with 1 year of eligibility left, because they did that for 4 straight years, and they might do it for another year, even with a new regime there, or a somewhat new regime. Again, we'll get to that. I'm more looking at like Chase Clark. I tweeted this out yesterday. He's AIC. AIC used a couple of goalies this year, but Clark was the bulk starter for them. This will actually be, he's transferred twice before. And so you look in the back of his baseball card, he'll have started his college career at Quinnipiac, then transferred to Sacred Heart, your favorite team, then played at AIC this year, and next year he'll play somewhere else, because obviously AIC is closing up shop at the D1 level. But, a guy with 25 games played, 280 goals against, 913 save. It's not going to light the world on fire, but I think that's a candidate that I think St. Cloud would be potentially in the market for. I think the Bentley goalie, that Hasley that you're mentioning, 925 and a sub-2 goals against, and played in the tournament. That game-winning goal for BC probably wants back, but that probably turned some heads. There's been a pipeline, too, from Atlantic to like Big Ten in particular. I bet he ends up with a big name program. Like Kyle McClellan won the Richter 2 years ago. He was a Mercyhurst to Wisconsin transfer. Owen Say, also Mercyhurst, went to Notre Dame this year. Bad Notre Dame team, but Say put up really good numbers. Probably their MVP this year. That Jake Prycheski, he was a Canisius transfer. He transferred to Michigan. St. Cloud would have seen him last year and took Michigan to the Frozen Four. So there's been like AHA goalies have found these successful landing spots at Big Ten programs after putting up a good year in Atlantic, and it's translated in some cases to success at a bigger stage with a program like that. So I would assume that Hasley's going somewhere. Maybe that's got some more of that NIL money that you're mentioning with those more resource rich programs. That might be too rich for St. Cloud's blood, is what I'm saying.
And I know a lot of people might scoff at AHA talent and whatnot, but like I said in the as I tweeted out, Bentley 22nd in the pairwise. I mean, they weren't any type of a slouch. It kind of shows you the depth of college hockey. And as I said a couple of podcasts ago, where I was like, how many teams can actually win? And I kind of looked at as a negative that there weren't enough good teams. That should be more framed looking back as there's so much parity right now. And that is a good thing, that there are so many programs out there, that the depth is so good in college hockey, that so many players are looking at college hockey as a way to get better and have a good stepping stone into a solid career, at the NHL level or even in Europe as well, where, that a lot of players take that route as well. So it does show that, a lot of the AIC players that, had to go into the portal because of it, there could be some really good players plugged in there, and it's not like they're a terrible team. They're still able to make college hockey, and they're still able to make an impact, I think, on any one of our squads. So it'll be kind of fun to see where all of them end up as well.
Just getting back to my take about Posch, like, do you consider Posch to be an elite college goaltender? Obviously, he's not college anymore, but before that news came out that he signed with the Avalanche, would you have considered him elite?
No. Because I think when I think of elite, I think of more of a longevity thing. By his numbers, like, Jace Wazlowski, is he elite? Maybe in Halo 2.
Go in that realm here too a little bit. But would you consider his loss of the three guys that we mentioned? Obviously, Clark, I'm sure, is not going to be the guy. Between him and Ralph, let's say, what's the bigger loss to you?
Ooh, that's a good question. Because you have to look at the body of work as well. Now, we do have
if this helps you out, like, whose loss? If we're like shaving wins off of the roster as it currently stands, which player loses more games for this team?
As of right now, I'd have to say Posch, because we don't know there's the unknown with Shostak, and we know of Gray. And if we have Gray, that, is a lot of games. I mean, we saw that this year, how many games that a Posch injury can end up harming.
And we saw how many games he was able to steal for the team in the first half too.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm putting that out there that his loss might be the most impactful so far.
Now, the flip side of that is, if, Shostak comes in and he is 80%, but our defense now, kind of what we're looking at, because who's left on our defense right now? Reiners, Wiley, Thiessen, Bufflin. I mean, that's.
Did you say Wiley?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Tanner
that's where
Henrik's coming in. You got some guys coming in too,
and then you got some guys coming in. But like right now, I'm looking at our defense kind of thing. That defense core isn't really, striking out to me, and I think, or as a huge positive. So that's where I'm a little bit, that may be something where Ralph's present might be a little bit more. So it's definitely comparable. And it's just the unknown of what we have, like with Hendricks coming in and also a Shostak, what they're going to bring to the table. Because I can see both of them performing even better.
Yeah, that's why I want some insurance in the goaltending position. You got to get someone else coming in. And because I don't think you want to give the job to Shostak on opening night and just run with him. I don't think that's a plan that college coaches would want. Just knowing how much they tend to defer to older veteran players. And you're going to need a third goalie in any case. So they're going to have someone. And as you mentioned, there's different avenues to get players, more avenues now with CHL as a potential pipeline. But we listed off a couple of the guys in the portal. There's bound to be more guys that enter the portal. There's always going to be guys like Gavin Enright available. Gavin Enright was in the portal in the summertime and no one was picking him up. He was probably going to hang him up, play club hockey, if anything, this past year until, what was that? Charlie Glockner, was that his name?
Yeah.
Who was the transfer they got from maybe Michigan Tech?
Northern Michigan.
Yeah, and then he ended up saying, I'm done with hockey. So that was the only reason that Enright was added to the roster. You can find Zach Sandy from UMD is in the portal, like a guy who doesn't really look like a viable college goaltender. Someone like that is always, someone with pads is going to be available in the portal. So you can get a warm body if you absolutely need it. I do think the Huskies should be in the market for someone with a little bit better profile than just your like replacement level, like E-bug type goalie. And I think one of those is available. I think that there's going to be guys in those quote unquote lesser leagues that are going to look at even an 8th place St. Cloud team and see that as a step up and a bigger spotlight and a bigger opportunity. And so I would hope that that's something St. Cloud is able to pick up. But yeah, as you mentioned, I mean, goalies are a fickle position. As you mentioned, like, do most Husky fans, you're going to ask them what the highest single season save percentage for a St. Cloud goalie would be and how many would say Jason Lozowski, which is the correct answer. This is a team that David Renak was picked as a goalie in our all-time draft a couple of years ago, and he never put up a 920 save. And the year that they made the Frozen Four, he had a 904 save percentage. They won a Penrose. They won,
and he didn't beat one of those lesser Atlantic hockey teams.
Couldn't do that either. They won a Penrose. They won a McNaughton, and went to a Frozen Four with Ryan Farragher as their goaltender. So I mean, you can make hay with average to even slightly below average in Farragher's case, probably goaltenders. And I'm not saying that that's like something that you plan on. Obviously,
that's what you strive for.
You want your goalies to be above average, and Posch definitely was this year. And so it is a loss, but I believe I'm a believer in Shostak, and I think that there's enough talent to be had to pluck off someone else to come in here as an insurance policy. I still think goal scoring is your number one priority, even with Posch's absence, which is a big loss. I still think that this team is going to sink or swim if they can rebound with getting 30 to 40 more goals on the score sheet next year. And that's the bigger task, I think, the more vexing problem for this coaching staff to solve over this offseason.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot, that we're going to be able to win, if we go again next year with a 219 total goals per game average. Well, you're completely right. That's no
way to run a railroad. You can't make it in today's college hockey. Just list the teams that were around St. Cloud in that stat. Guarantee you none of those were quality teams this year. You got to score the puck. And so that's obviously the big priority over this offseason. And maybe it's just the development of the players that you have on roster and the guys that you're bringing in as recruits. But that's going to be, I think, the big focus. But clearly, Posch, not something we wanted to hear. It was surprising to both of us. It sounds like we wish him the best. But disappointed to see that. But I think that that's a position that you can shore up.
Yeah, we were only marginally better than Miami in that instance. Miami
Never-
1.9.
Never a good sign to be in the same sentence as Miami. with
Right.
anything.
Exactly. So, let's, I do want to talk about obviously the regionals because there were a lot of really good games, but as we're still kind of talking about portal and all this stuff, let's go, I guess, NCHC news, or let's go around with, obviously the big change. Fireberry crowd got what they wanted in a coaching search that lasted all of 2 days. Dane Jackson, longtime assistant with Hacksaw and Barry, ends up getting the gig. I don't know. And I think we're kind of on the same page with it. Is just kind of a bizarre hire, in my opinion. And judging from the reaction from the North Dakota faithful, it seems like it also is very much a kind of a boring ho-hum. Like, this is the regime that got you into this quote unquote mess, and you're just going to kind of stick with it with Dane Jackson. So that's, I don't know. It was just kind of an interesting that they had that. I did chuckle quite a bit when it comes to all of the random names that they threw out there for on the coaching search that was thrown out by mostly Sloshman, but a couple other fans that were going through too. Kind of fun to roll your eyes at some of those suggestions, but it just kind of seemed like a bizarre choice to go with it, and but just kind of wondering what your takes on that.
Bizarre, but as we mentioned last week, probably the Club Plus leader to take that job was going to be Dane Jackson. So it's like, it's shocking, but it's not shocking at all. But as I said last show, it's kind of like the Colin Ralph for any of these portal moves, where you gotta have the entire equation in front of you to do the analysis. It's not just the firing Barry, it's who are you hiring as his replacement. And as to hire his number two right-hand man to elevate him to the coaching position doesn't seem like it's, there's such a provincial program in North Dakota. It's always got to be North Dakota guys. We only promote from within. I did see that the other finalists for the job, there was Jason Herder, was Western Michigan's top assistant. He's a North Dakota alum, so you got that in there. I think all of them were alums, but then Matt Smaby was a USHL bred coach. He seemed like a decent prospect. Nick Four, I think, was another USHL type or experienced coach. But they end up going with Jackson. And the cognitive dissonance that I saw some North Dakota fans going through on social media was kind of entertaining, because what we saw was shortly after the announcement was made, or maybe the day after, was Livanovich. Am I pronouncing it right? I always Livanovich. I always butcher his name. But it was announced that he's coming back, and he wouldn't have come back if it wasn't for the hiring of Jackson. So a lot of Dakota fans are like, all right, see, it was the right move. And then today we saw the other shoe drop with, as you mentioned, Perron bolting, and then also Sasha Boisvert, who's the NCHC Rookie of the Year. Owen McLaughlin, another 30-point scorer. They both gone. And so you're losing those top-end guys. And again, I just wonder, like, you hire any of those other candidates, maybe, who I know his profile has increased over the last couple of years. He's been mentioned for jobs other than North Dakota in recent years. You hire someone like that, someone who's not currently on staff, as sort of a fresh injection, somewhat outside voice. Obviously, he's got the ties to North Dakota, but, and as I mentioned last week, like, I felt like they needed to just clean house. Thinking about it more, like, whoever they would have hired, if it was going to be an outside hire, they probably would have kept on Jackson as an assistant. And that's kind of what you do to try to mitigate recruiting losses. St. Cloud did this with, Mike Gibbons was on Larson's staff as a sort of a bridge from the Motzko to the Larson eras. And I would imagine if they were to go the outside hire route, that at least Jackson or another one of the main recruiters on staff would have stayed on at least for the first year or two. You could have done that, but as it stands now, we're talking like about nil money, and so as the dust settles here, what you're gonna do is you're gonna pay Barry what he was due next year to not coach, which is close to $500,000. You're going to probably bump up Jackson's salary. Surely going to bump up his salary. You're going to have to hire a new assistant to replace Jackson. I saw that Carl Gehring also.
When Gehring left.
So probably a couple of assistants that you're going to have to hire. And some pay raises as far as Jackson was the number one assistant. So you're going to have to bring in some of that pay grade. Like you add it all up, you're north of, close to maybe $750,000 of extra expense that you wouldn't have incurred had you just kept Barry there. And what was the price of that? To keep Jake Levanovich, which I probably just butchered the name again, keeping him there for one more year. Like that's all that you get for that $750K that I'm just estimating. You could have spent a lot of money to several different players to either keep them in North Dakota green or to buy any amount of other players. And I think the best tweet that I saw is Dane Jackson guaranteed, write it down, going to be in the Frozen Four in 3 years. If that was the kind of level-headed optimism, I don't know why you're a North Dakota fan who was calling for Bradbury's head for the last 5 years. If that's the kind of patience that you're going to have with Dane Jackson, let me see that patience play out, because I doubt it.
Yeah.
But as I mentioned last show, I wish that they bungled it, and they may have bungled it. They may hit a home run. Who knows? Maybe Dane Jackson was born to be a head coach in North Dakota. But I guess we'll see. I think the early results are underwhelming. And as a St. Cloud fan who roots against North Dakota, I'll take it.
Yeah. Anytime that program's in some kind of a question mark, I'll be a fan. So, but any others?
Livanovich.
Livanovich.
I'm gonna practice it. I mean, I've practiced it in my head so many times, and I always, when it come to the point of actually saying it, I never get it right.
Yeah. Like you said, Sasha Bovair, NCHC Rookie of the Year, he's taking his talents to the portal. Another name that kind of stuck out to me is somebody who I feel like was always a thorn in the side for the Huskies, would be Zachariah Wisdom from Colorado College. I thought he had a very solid season. He always ended up putting up points against us. So he's going somewhere else. And also, when I was talking about Gabnett and his going hard into the CEHL for the Canadian Major Juniors, a lot of his players end up going into the portal as well. So they're going to be Omaha's going to have quite a bit of a new look there for next season. We'll kind of get more on the off-season podcast about kind of what it looks like and incoming for the Huskies and kind of where it shakes out and, how this portal season ends up going, to see if or who Larson's able to pick up. So,
and who did you say for Perone? That was Perone was the one that said that he made up his mind in February.
It allegedly, from Schlossman's reporting, they said that his teammates went unnamed, said that Perone made up his decision in February that he was going somewhere else.
Was that Michigan? Did I see Michigan as his landing spot? And then was Boisvert BU? I think I've seen some reports.
I think yes. I think Boisvert. I think I saw BU.
Do we trust this college puck NXT?
I don't know.
They seem to be on, or they seem to claim at least that they're on top of recruiting, but they're reporting that Boisvert is going to BU. So you can take that with a grain of salt if you'd like, but that's at least what one Twitter account is reporting. And yeah, there was another hockey reporter, Cam Robinson. He's reporting that Perone is going to Michigan for next season. So we've already got landing spots, and obviously we've been told that no tampering, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. These high end guys already know where they're going when they enter the portal. I'm sure in the next couple of days we'll learn a lot of different landing spots for these guys. Tanner Lutke from Omaha is probably the biggest name of that group of, I think, 9 players from Omaha that entered the portal. He was a draft pick of Utah, and so I was a little surprised to see him. He was hurt most of this year, but last year he was their top scorer, and a bit surprising. Most of the guys in the portal for them, more fringe guys, but I'm sure Lutke is the biggest loss for that Mavericks fans are mourning.
Pino Nemi, former Husky recruit who followed Bob. Yeah. Followed Bob to Minnesota, then ended up in Omaha, and then now is going to parts unknown as of right now.
I mean, it's the thing about the portal. I mean, every team is going to be affected. I mean, there's in the short history of the portal, it's not like it's very rare that a team doesn't have anyone enter the portal or get a guy from the portal. I think he mentioned it was it last year that Bemidji didn't have, or maybe it was 2 years ago because Pole Camp was it last year. But I remember one of the years that we've done this show that you mentioned that Bemidji was the only team to not have anyone in or out of the portal over the offseason.
Yeah, I think
probably
it was
at this
2 years
point.
Ago, yeah.
At this point, I'm sure everybody's going to have in and out at least one player in there. Miami had a bunch of players. What's it? It's another 9. I'm just doing the count on the fly here. 9 players there entering the portal. I mean, we still got Denver and Western Michigan playing. So those, if any players from those teams enter, it won't be until after the Frozen Four. So there's probably going to be a handful from those teams as well. I mentioned the 2 CC players. Arizona State had, I'm looking, 6 players enter the portal. So, I mean, every team's going to have losses. And
so right now you're looking at the Huskies with just 2.
It doesn't look so bad, but again,
look so bad.
You weight the Ralph loss, whereas 7 of the 9, let's say Omaha guys, are probably more non-impact players. You weight the Ralph loss against players of that lower caliber. It still is a significant loss for the Huskies on portal day.
Just quickly, the biggest bummer I would say for me when it comes to the portal would be sadly the Josie St. Martin on the women's side, where I was pretty excited to see her name go into the portal from Ohio State. Highly touted as a freshman, 3-time under 18 star for Team USA. 10 points, 5 goals, 5 assists her freshman year. So Ohio State, seeing her in the portal, I was like, ooh, I think that should be someone that's on Adolski's radar. And it looks like she is going to Minnesota Duluth. So that was kind of a bummer that I saw that. I was hoping that that would be someone that Adolski would be able to grab.
Yeah, no updates from the women's side on the portal. Just still have the 3 players, Delmonico, Henderson, and Bray, that are in the portal. No movement reported as far as players coming to the Huskies from the portal, but knowing Adolski's history with that the last couple of years, probably should at least expect a player or 2 coming St. Cloud's way through the portal, and we'll analyze and react if and when that happens.
Exactly. Let's talk about the regionals. We have our Frozen Four all set to go. And again, it wouldn't be a Frozen Four. It wouldn't be a national championship game without NCHC representation. And again, we're getting that this year. I guess I will maybe have to eat a little bit of crow after I said, is the NCHC even good? And sure enough, 2 out of the 4 teams are NCHC. The only 2 that made the tournament are the ones still playing. They'll play each other for Denver and Western Michigan, rematch of the Frozen Face-Off. So I got a little bit of an appetizer when I went to that game, along with 5,500 of my closest friends. And then the other game, Penn State was able to survive overtime against Connecticut, which was a little bit of a bummer. And then who's the other team? I forgot.
BU.
BU.
That riveting Toledo regional for you. You said that you were going to sleep through it.
I was going
to had no interest in any of those 4 teams.
No interest in any of those 4 teams, and it was overall top to bottom. It was a lot of fun games. I think this is probably one of the more fun.
Really?
Yeah. Overall, I thought like really the only dud game I would say would be that 8 to.
The BU
I don't even
Ohio State game, which was tied going into the third.
Yeah.
5. I mean that main Penn State game 5-1, kind of a snoozer. Over early. I remember. I don't know. Last year, I remember having more fun.
The crowd made that one fun for me, though. And I was actually surprised with Penn State. I would maybe overlook them a little bit, but that Penn State UConn game, I had so much fun watching that as an outside fan.
That was probably the best of the regional finals, for sure. Maybe the best game of the tournament so far. I think the Denver BC game would have been the best on paper. I'm not sure I'd give that honor after the game actually played out the way it did.
No.
I mean, the Minnesota UMass game, probably the most memorable of the tournament. I just remember last year enjoying the regionals more than this year. This year was another one of those reminders of that I hate the format of the regionals and about how one and dones are just not ideal for this sport. I mean, a lot of different, check off the bullet points here. 4 seed playing in a quasi home game goes to the Frozen Four. Check. You love that Penn State atmosphere, and I liked it too. But part of me is like, they didn't earn this. Why do Maine and UConn have to play in that environment? They earned
they ponied up the
same
money.
way that whoever's going to pay off Colin Ralph.
Earned it.
That's right. It's what you do in the 2020s college sports atmosphere, I guess. But you had that constant annoyance flare up again. I tweeted that out. 3 out of the last 4 times that a 4 seed has made the Frozen Four. Providence twice in the Providence regional as a 4 seed. Now, technically, they didn't host those regionals because they got Brown to do it. But playing in front of a Providence crowd in Providence vaulted them to 2 Frozen Fours and 1 national title. And now Penn State does the same here by hosting the Allentown regional. So you had that. You had bad ice conditions. Check. So bad that ESPN was interviewing an ice technician.
That was ridiculous.
In the middle of the game.
That I agree was ridiculous.
I was reminded of they did the Geno Parrish. It wasn't kicking off the post and goalie shenanigans, but no, it's the pegs and it's the ice. And I guess they cranked up the AC in the building because they don't play hockey at that arena much anymore. Seems like a weird choice to host a part of your postseason tournament at such a venue that doesn't host hockey games. Feels like that would be important. So you had that involved in it.
You had CHN gushing over a Schaefer win.
So you had that. You had, I thought, across the board throughout most of the games, terrible officiating. Some of that came at the Gophers' expense, which was delicious.
Oh,
I'm not complaining about that.
I need the K-Fan delicious button. Like, what's the? I don't know where to find that. That's
I always love that one because when it's at the Gophers' expense, those were some brutal calls, I should say.
Delicious.
It doesn't mean that that doesn't compensate for Jimmy Snuggerud's slack checking on the game-winning goal. They're slack checking his way to the NHL as UMass goes in on that play on a 3-on-5 because they ended up changing 2 guys. still were able to get that game-winning goal. And it's just for the Gophers. It feels
On the
too right
same-
to
on the
bitch about
same-
that than to actually win the game.
On the same play that they score 2 other times. Like, they've done that backdoor play so many times, and you don't think they're going to go back to it in overtime. And of course, like you said, they're coming in on a inverse odd man rush where you've got plenty of numbers there to actually play defense, and you just bungle it.
Now, again, that the officiating there, because you had the trip in overtime, which it was a trip.
Okay, so you're on saying it's a trip.
Sure, I don't really think that my Gopher hatred doesn't cloud me that much. You really don't think that was a trip?
Oh God, I think it's 100% a trip. But I saw actually some discourse where people were saying that it was more that he lost an edge and he was going down just before the contact was made. I think, okay, maybe, but at the same time, anytime you get your stick in that area and somebody goes down, it's going to be a call at any other time. So I 100% said that should have been called.
Tripping. It's by the rule book tripping. You can even tell when the ref went in to do the video review to give the thumbs up to the game-winning goal, because they have to do that for game winners. The look on his face was, I effed this up and I want to get out of this building right now. He did not. He had a sheepish, let's say, look on his face. So I think even he knew it. But the one that made the second UMass goal, where Motzko complained about that, where he claimed that the Gopher guy took a high stick there. That one I can see why they let that one go, because puck was behind the net. The Gopher guy initiates contact with the UMass guy. So they're both sort of going after the body first. So I can see from their perspective, takes 2 to tango, and you initiated the contact. I mean, again, that's another by the book penalty that UMass had there. So that goes in. And then the whole equipment snafu with their goaltender, and then having to take him out of the game to bring in their backup, who immediately gives up the game tying goal. Then they bring Soulier back into the game. I thought it was an injury thing. And then Motzko claiming that he wanted to take a timeout, but the refs told him, because it's going to take longer for you to do that, you got to bring in your backup, which I guess I learned was a new rule this offseason. Denver did the same thing last year in the tournament, took a long 5-minute unplanned equipment timeout in overtime in their first round of game. It's UMass as well. I'm sure Carvel knew that firsthand. Perhaps he had some input there, as you're not allowing the opponent to get away with basically an extended free timeout here for an equipment issue, which seemed like a pretty preventable equipment issue. Whatever Soulier had, I don't see what the point, why you needed to spend 10 minutes to fix your pad or whatever it was. I don't think that was the fault of UMass. So I'm glad that the refs enforced that one. Yeah. And I don't like that Motzko included that in his lump of grievances after.
Well, he probably didn't come up with that rule, so he probably didn't know it existed. As what Motzko's issue probably
I didn't
was.
Personally entreat the committee on the formulation of that rule. It doesn't exist to me. Well, you should read the rule book, Bob. That's what they are supposed to enforce. So again, I do think
they'll probably ask for an extra day of rest in between equipment issues is actually going to be the next.
That's what his first bullet point at the coaches convention this summer is. We got to get a loophole created for that rule, and we know it's the wheels are spinning in his head. Is all I'm saying. But so you had, but not only that game, but the regional final with UMass and Western. You had the 2 5-minute majors, which I both thought were real dicey calls, especially the UMass where you're booting the player out of the game, who's one of their best players. I thought that was inserting officiating to a degree that was uncomfortable to me. The BU Cornell regional final too, I thought was vastly over officiated. These are the things you get with one and done hockey, where these random sort of, NCHC officials were involved in both of those games. These are the kinds of events that make This is why I call the regionals in particular spins of the roulette wheel, and why I feel it's too random. And again, and this is the first regionals that I'm back on Twitter. This is my fault more than anything, but man, the talking points and the NCHC rules talking point in particular, it's a lot. And I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to go into it too much, but all I'll say is any tweets that are using the NCAA tournament results as some sort of validation for any point you're trying to make, there's no grand truths to be generated as a result of NCAA tournament games. All the little things that the bullet points that are rattled off here, these are all points towards the argument that you should take all of these results with a grain of salt. And that's what I'm most frustrated with when it comes to the tournament, is that there's this feeling, at least it's probably just for me, seems like you had a good, enjoyable experience this weekend, but I don't really feel like we got the 4 teams that really comprise this Frozen Four. I feel like there was a nagging sense of this could all have been completely different. And based on little bits here and there, little things changed here and there, refs calls, bad ice, all this. It's another reason why I think that the regional system needs to be overhauled.
And that's why I think, God, this tournament had everything. It had some games maybe a little bit less enticing, but I think it had some overtime drama to it. It had some controversy. It had some talking points, had some randomness, some chaos, everything I want in a tournament that does not include St. Cloud State. So obviously if St. Cloud was in one of these brackets, I would like it a little bit differently, but if I'm just a hockey fan watching it, I'm liking the chaos that it brings.
I can see that. And
I will 100% agree with you in that Manchester regional. First off, that Boston College Bentley game, I had so much fun rooting for Bentley. And I know it was only 2-1, and I thought it would be a long shot anyway, but Bentley, I thought, gave it their all. And you Gorg checked me on one of my tweets, which I always appreciate too. But if we're going to keep up with this whole notion of neutral site, which obviously it's not going away anytime soon, I just don't understand why putting it into arenas that don't have hockey regularly. Like, there are plenty of hockey arenas in the area in New Hampshire or anywhere in the Northeast that has ice on a year-round basis that can handle it. And just to have that as a deterring factor, or like anything that can kind of be an extra obstacle that shouldn't plan for in hockey, we should avoid that. And so that was, I would say, the only thing I would change really is just that ice issue and that venue in general. And it's like we can't, if we're going to have these neutral sites, we got to have it where hockey is normally played. And there's plenty of options. I like what we have here in the West, and I know they don't call it the West anymore or whatnot, but and granted, Fargo did have their ice issues when St. Cloud played as well, but I do like it at least that it's places where they have hockey regularly. And there's plenty of places out east where they do that. And I think they need to look at those options to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Yeah, I'm looking at the future sites. We've got regionals set through 2028. And we mentioned last show if Weldie and Father Weldie were looking to replace
the Grand Poobah,
the Frozen face-off weekend with regionals. They've got opportunities in these next couple of years with Sioux Falls next year, Fargo in 2027, then both Fargo and Sioux Falls in 2028. Yeah, Manchester's not on the list here for the next 3. The Eastern regionals, you've got Albany next year, Worcester. These are all rinse and repeat. Nothing new with these. They regularly have hosted regionals for 20 years. Bridgeport and Springfield, Mass in 2027. And then 2028, you've got Allentown again, and then Rochester. Rochester, that's an AHL facility. AHL team regularly plays in that arena. Same with Bridgeport and Springfield. I don't think Worcester, I think they used to have an AHL team, but I'm not sure if there was a regular hockey tenant there yet. And I think Albany, the Times Union Center, I do think there's a AHL team there as well. I'm just looking at, no, it doesn't look like they used to have the Albany Devils there as recently as 2017, but it doesn't look like they have a full-time hockey tenant there either. So we shall see. Was Albany where St. Cloud won in the Bean Pot in 2021? I think that was Albany. So maybe St. Cloud next year can repeat some magic in Albany. But yeah, some of these have regular hockey tenants that I mentioned. Some of them don't. You feel like that would be high on the list of priorities when selecting regional hosts. And the defenders of the current system, like Woden, will mention it's all about bidding. You got to put the bid in. If you don't bid, then boo-hoo. And these sites that we see all the time, the Albanys and Woosters and whatnot, are because they're the only ones really that are putting in bids. So this is why we get the same sites over and over again. The attendance seemed okay.
Is that a negative to you?
What?
That it's the same sites?
Not necessarily. But Manchester. We've seen Manchester almost every other year, it seems like, for the last, 10, 20 years. Manchester's been a regular host of these. But I don't like to see ice issues like that. And I know, Fargo, they said with the Fargo Regional in 2019, that was, they blame that on the NCAA forces rinks to redo their whole logos. They got to redo the whole ice. And they said that year they did it too late, too recent to the regional, that the ice wasn't in great shape for the regional. And since then they've made extra steps to ensure that the ice is in better condition than it was in that year. And that seems like it's the only year it's really been an issue there. So yeah, no, and I'm sure that's why they're getting bids. I'm sure that's why Manchester got the bid this year, 4 years ago, whenever they awarded these bids, is because they have a history of hosting these things. The last time that they had in 2023, that was BU and Cornell at the regional final there. That was almost a sold out packed place, 9,000, in a 10 or 11,000 capacity arena. I would have thought that was a successful regional at that 2 years ago. This year you had ice issues and the attendance wasn't the place wasn't as hopping as it was in years past. But attendance was decent. At least reported attendance was in the 85% range. I saw Austria report. Good to see Austria still reporting. But again, some places were, like the Fargo regional semis were good, well attended. We had Mankato and the Gophers there, but with both of those teams losing, that regional final was a little sparse with Western and UMass. It's another kind of risk you take. You might sell the tickets, especially that's what people say with these North Dakota regionals. Well, they're all sold out. North Dakota fans buy them, so you shouldn't make any changes based on attendance to try to juice up attendance in those regionals. But it still makes a difference who's playing in those games, especially the regional final. If it's two non-local teams like we saw in that regional final in Fargo. So I feel like I'm going to propose. I was thinking a lot this weekend about what would you do to change the regional system, be as creative as possible. I want to have an hour-long discussion in June or July for one of our summer podcasts to have let's have a couple of beers and let's throw out some crazy ideas about what would we do just in the ideal world. It ain't going to happen, but what would we want to do? Let's have some fun and come up with some ideas to tinker with the format. And I want to go as off the wall as you'd like.
All right.
You want to go I just want home sites to replace the regionals. I want to do more rational solutions or irrational solutions. I want 7-game series for every round of the playoffs. Throw it out there. We'll put it out there for our listeners, all 12 of them, to see if they've got any good ideas. Dan Jacobson can chime in.
What
do you think about that?
24-12 this episode alone.
Well, we're an hour and a half in. I imagine that half of them have dropped off by now.
That's
but
fair.
I don't know if this on-air production meeting, if that sounds like a good idea for one of our summer pods, because I've got ideas.
I mean, usually our summer pods are so jam-packed with so much good hockey content. I think maybe we can.
I'm thinking like July, because it'll be after the portal.
Sure.
All of like our big news will be out. It feels like July, August. Those are the ones that we're most scraping for content. Okay. So put a pin in that.
All right. Perfect. I like it. So. All right. Anything else you want to say? Do we do predictions or we do predictions next
We could probably do that next week because we've got the dead week, which again, that'd be part of my proposal. Get rid of the dead week between the regionals and the Frozen Four. Women don't do the dead week. Men don't have to do it either. So yeah, let's shove that off to next week.
All right. We'll shove that off. Anything else I wanted to say? Yeah, that Penn State UConn game. I thought that was really fun.
It was a good game. I will not. I don't want to give that short shrift. That overtime period in particular. Penn State's goalie made some great saves.
Yeah, I really thought
a good game-winning goal.
Yeah, I really thought Penn State or UConn was going to be able to pull that one out.
And you were close with all four of your Frozen Four teams being Hockey East teams. I mean, they were all in the regional final.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you came in overtime there, and then BC against Denver, you came that close to nailing it. Or no, I missed. Oh, yeah. Well, then UMass with Western Michigan, just
with the major penalties that cooked the books there.
So you were close, but
I was close.
And I didn't do any better. I only picked one of the four teams, and that was Western. Western, the team that I can continually say that I'm down on the NCHC and don't buy into the Western hype. I picked them on last week's show, and they're the only team that I picked that actually made the Frozen Four.
As my band director used to say, close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades.
Correct.
So, let's go. Do you have, I mean, I don't really want to bring this up, but I have it written down here. Do you have receipts? Are you bringing the receipts from our earlier podcast, our earlier prognostications? And I am not looking forward to this. I don't like being held accountable for my actions ever since college, as my police report says as well. I promise you, I did not mean to puke on that. But anyway.
Yeah, no, we like to do this. We like to hold ourselves accountable on this show because I think it makes for good content. We throughout the year we make several predictions, and we always like to revisit them at the end of the year to see how well we did. Last year, I remember I did better than you. Is all I can remember. I've got a spreadsheet started. So this was the big first step. So now I'm going to automate this. I'll be able to check back much more easily and cross-reference for my purposes.
You're going to put it into a dashboard. You're going to have a Tableau page in public. You'll be able to...
It's going to be Charlie Day in Always Sunny with the
Pepe Silva
board and the conspiracy theories. It's going to be that. I'm going to be that crazy on it. But just going off memory, I think I did slightly better than you last year. And what we do is we pick the NCHC standings before the season starts. We pick the WCHA standings, and then twice a year, once at the end of October / beginning of November, and then also the first week end roughly of January, we pick the NCAA tournament field for both the men and the women. And last year, going off memory, I think I did slightly better than you. This year, you did slightly better than me. So you shouldn't be scared about this, because I think you're clearly the winner this year. Again, it's close, but you edged me out on most of the categories this year. So we won't go super in depth. Again, it'll be at least 20 minutes, I'm sure. But I'll go over some of the high points for the WCHA, which we predicted. We were very close. We both got 4 standings positions nailed. And so it's kind of a wash from that regard.
Mm.
We both had Wisconsin number 1. And keep in mind, we predicted this after UMD swept Ohio State in that September summer series. Before anybody else had played games, they played conference games. And our preview show was coming on the heels of that, and it made a big influence on our picks because you ended up moving up Duluth 1 slot. So you basically flip-flopped. You had Minnesota at 3 and UMD 4th, but then you switched that. You put UMD at 3 and Minnesota at 4 because of that sweep. And then I also bumped down Ohio State to 3, and I put Minnesota at 2. Anyway, you spin it. We both had 4 right. So we both had Wisconsin at 1, SCSU at 5, Bemidji at 8, and we both had St. Thomas and Mankato 6 and 7. That was ended up wrong. So I guess we only had 3 correct. But all the other ones, we were only off by 1 slot on the other teams that we got wrong. Like, again, we both flip-flopped St. Thomas and Mankato. Mankato was 6 and St. Thomas was 7. And then Minnesota, I had them 1 spot higher. You had them 1 spot too low. So the standings are a wash.
Sure.
I had taken St. Cloud to make the NCAAs. You did not. So you would have been correct on that prediction. We did do conference tournament champions for the other conferences, and son of a gun, you took Sacred Heart in the preseason to win Nuha. I went with Franklin Pierce. That was wrong. We both nailed Penn State for Atlantic Hockey. Hockey East, we both got wrong. ECAC, I took Colgate, you took Clarkson. It ended up being Cornell. So we both got that wrong. I did say that with talking about that Ohio State's getting swept by Duluth. I said, watch Ohio State go to Duluth later in the season and sweep them. And they did. So I was right on that. And so we had some fun there, but basically a wash on the standings. So, but I'll give you the Sacred Heart. That was a snipe at the beginning of the season. For the NCHC, we didn't do very well on this overall.
No.
You did slightly better. We both picked Denver as our number 1 team, which I'll still say they are the best team in the conference, right? Even at this point. I mean, with Western winning the Penrose and the conference tournament.
They don't. I mean, especially tournament time. It's tough to bet against Carl in a one game situation.
Yeah, and so we both had them as 1. We even mentioned, like, what would be the lowest position that we'd be shocked that they placed, and we said like anything below 3rd. And it turns out they had to go to the last weekend of the year to clinch home ice. Like, that's how close they were. They ended up being 3rd. You picked St. Cloud. We'll get into this, the St. Cloud aspect of this, because we were a little off on the Huskies this year. You had them 2nd. I had them 3rd. They ended up being 8th, as we know. We brought up the fact that McMahon had his predictions had come in at that point, and he predicted them for 8th place in the NCHC, and we were laughing and scoffing and
good times had.
What an idiot.
Yeah.
Specifically, like 26th in pairwise, we were gasping. This 52nd ranked recruiting class, where is he coming up with this formula?
Oh, wow. Yep. I'll
How
take my
wrong
crow.
we ended up being. We both picked them, the Huskies, to make the NCAAs. That, remind me, did we get that right? Because I don't think we did.
Not a little bit.
Yeah, so I had Denver UND as 2, St. Cloud, CC, Western at 5th, Duluth at 6th, Omaha 7th, Arizona State at 8, and Miami at 9. Miami was the only one that I nailed at 9th place. You had Denver, SCSU, UND, Omaha at 4. That was the team that we most disagreed with. Because I had it 7th, and you nailed Omaha at 4.
There we go.
That's one that you nailed. CC at 5, Western at 6, Duluth at 7, Arizona State at 8, and Miami at 9. So you nailed Omaha at 4, UMD at 7, and Miami at 9. So you got 3 out of
Just
the 9
random.
correct. And I just got the 1 with Miami, which no one takes credit for nailing Miami at 9, I don't believe. We were talking about, I was torn between Duluth and Western. I'm like, I'll give Western the bump to 5th place just because I like Furschweiler. I'll give him the 5th place bump. And we made Alex bump puns at that time too. But I don't think that we were thinking a Penrose was in their future. But we both agreed for St. Cloud. We both agreed biggest question mark, goaltending, and brought up that McMahon with the scoring being his big question mark. And we're just like, scoring, that's like for sure. It's the one thing that we least question. We were excited about Thorson. We were excited about Brnovic. We did do the over-under. I did over-under 4.5 appearances for Gavin Enright. You picked the over, and you picked the under on 4.5 for Gray. So you nailed those two. Exactly. Which, again, son of a gun, Travis.
Nice.
I picked the under for 4.5 for Enright, and I was like, if we're turning to Enright, we are in trouble, which it turned out we were. It wasn't necessarily Enright's fault, but we were in trouble if we went to him. You were like 1 through 7 in this conference is tight, and you picked 6 teams to make the tournament from the NCHC. So that top 6 of yours was all making the tournament. And we only got 2 out of the NCHC, but we both picked the Huskies, as we said, and that did not come to fruition. And I was joking about Miami, like there's no way but up for Miami. Winning 1 conference game last year, they can't do any worse than that, right?
Oh,
Nay.
Yes, they can.
They told us they sure can. You just, again, getting some notes here. Western always just has a 1 line. They're always a 1-line team. That's what you said about the Broncos. So that's why you were putting them at 6. You're a little soft on Western this year, but you still had them making the NCAAs because you had the top 6 make the tourney, and Western would have been in that group. So I guess you weren't super low on them, and I said top 5 teams would make the NCAAs. So which includes Western as well. So take that, Bronco Dan. We've always been high on your Western Broncos, and so we were a little bit off as it turned out with the actual standings, how they shook out, and then also just the strength of the league. Again, that's a big debate apparently on Twitter. Again, I'll remind folks, down is a relative term. I think when people, like I said, Starman weighed in on this, it was ridiculous. But
he's not talking about congestion pricing in New York.
I think people think when they see NCHC's down, they read it as someone is saying the NCHC is a bad conference. That's not what down means. Down is a relative term. It's just they weren't as strong as both Hockey East or the Big Ten was in the metrics that count when it comes to fielding the NCAA tournament this year. But it's all relative. You look at this was still a strong league. There's 3 strong leagues nationwide, and the labels of best, it's not like set in stone. No matter what, again, the NCAA tournament shakes out every year. I think some fans think that somewhere 10 years ago, the league became the best league ever, and nothing will change that unless someone wins the national title from a different conference. I guess that's the biggest data point that changes that talking, the assertion that the NCHC is the best league out there. But you look at their out of conference record this year with .603 winning percentage. That's a pretty good winning percentage for a conference. But to put that in perspective, in 2022-2023, that season, NCHC got 3 teams in to the tournament that year. Their out of conference winning percentage as a conference was .601. Basically the same, but slightly lower. But they got more teams in. Why? Because the other conferences didn't do as well, namely Hockey East, which only got 2 teams in that year. That's why I make it a big thing about touching on the other leagues on this podcast, because we can't just analyze St. Cloud in a bubble without putting in the context of the other NCHC teams, or more importantly, the other leagues across the country. Because I don't think that you can really get a firm grasp on what's going on in the sport if you don't look at those teams. At least follow them to the extent that you're aware of what's going on. It's not a surprise, and no one's being hosed. Like, people are coming up some elaborate schemes on how the pairwise is flawed because only 2 teams in this conference got into the tournament. It's, again, you're ignorant of the other conferences, their success this year. And that doesn't mean that the NCHC is a bad league. It just means in comparison to those other leagues this year and in comparison to the years of NCHC past, you've also got to, it goes both ways. Looking at league times where the NCHC got 6 teams in a conference or in the tournament in those years, like in 2015, the reason that they were able to do that is because they nailed down out of conference games, and that they were the best conference in out of conference games. And the same argument that you would say the Hockey East got too many teams in, you could apply that same exact argument for why the NCHC got too many teams in those years. So you got to be consistent. And I don't think it's a terribly hot take to think the NCHC was a slightly lesser league this year, even with me saying of the Final 4 teams, I think Denver's got this one in the bag again. And if we're taking credit, if the conference has to take credit for Denver's success, Denver, the Edina of college hockey, I'm supposed to be puffing my chest out because Denver is going to win another GD Natty. I'm not going to be a part of it. I'm sorry. So again, rant over. It's been on my mind, but we're on receipts.
The Edina of college hockey.
Am I wrong?
I don't think so. I mean, you had a good point.
Pretty cake eaty. They're always good. They've won the most titles. Private school. Well, Edina is not private, but they're as private enough as a public can get.
Yeah.
I think it's a fair. Was it last year? Was it the Edina band that represented Denver and St. Paul? Was that just like a myth, or was that just too good to be true? But
no, they did actually. Yeah.
So it was literally Edina was standing in as Denver surrogates. Yeah. So that's all that we need to know. They'll find another ritzy St. Louis area school to go incognito as fake Denver fans for the Frozen Four this year, I'm sure. So I guess we'll keep an eye out for that. Back to the receipts. So our Pick the Field shows in the early season one, I think last year we did about this as well as we did last year. It's just interesting. So for the women 11 team field, we each got 7 correct out of the 11. And I had St. Cloud in as well, even though I was torn. I was all doing this, like, it's my heart versus my head. My head says they're not going to make it. My heart says they will. I should have probably went with the head. You were out on the Huskies at that point. You stuck with Sacred Heart. You stuck with Sacred Heart to the end, which you were smart to do because you ended up emerging victorious on the new hot pick all year. You had Brown in the ECC. I don't know if that was a bit necessarily, or if you're 100% behind Brown.
No, that was definitely that was a bit for the Ustro poll.
Well, they got off to a good start on the women's side this year, so I think you're partly serious, but in any case, you were wrong. And you even went off Penn State. The one time that you went off Penn State, you picked RIT, strangely. And that turned out to be wrong as well. Yeah, and I only had 3 ECAC teams and 5 WCHA teams, which, again, was against my head and going more with my heart. We both had Quinnipiac. We had Quinnipiac in both of these pick the field shows for the women, and they ended up not making it. So that was a team that we were faithful on that we shouldn't have been. And we were sleeping on Cornell. We neither of us had Cornell at this point. And again, Ivies always have a late start to the year. Women always about 2 weeks ahead of the men. So Cornell would have played a couple of games by this point, but we were still sleeping on Cornell, which ended up being the tourney champion from that league. So we swung and missed there, but still 7 out of 11, roughly a month and a half into the season. It's not too bad of a percentage. For the men's side, again, we each had 10 out of 16 correct in our first Pick the Field show, which was November 10th. I put the date down of the recording. Just kind of looking at notables. You had said that you looked at the field and you're like, there's really 4 teams that have a legitimate chance to win the Natty. Denver, Boston College, Minnesota, and Maine. Those are your 4 teams.
And
they got one of them left.
One's still alive.
And they might be the favorite.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was interesting. My whole thing, I had the 4 Big Ten teams in. We both had Michigan, which ended up dropping out, but I was the only one of us to pick Ohio State. And my argument there was that their non-conference was really good, and that will buoy the Big Ten. As far as St. Cloud, I was out on St. Cloud. You were in on St. Cloud. I was still in on CC, and I even was kind of kicking myself at that point.
If I remember correctly, though, I believe I was in on like SCSU, just kind of like I don't know who else can. Like, I felt I wavered back and forth on them and then ended up coming around and saying, I think we can get off a swoon here.
You said the 41st ranked offense in the country for St. Cloud. That worries you. That's what you said.
Not wrong. Not wrong.
How would 55th ranked offense in the country? Does that worry you?
A little bit more.
There was
so,
one.
yes.
I don't know if it was that. I know there was one show where we had a question. I think it was after the Posch. It was like right after the Posch injury, and someone's like, "What's like the highest and lowest you think, like as far as like a ceiling and a floor for where they end up in pairwise?" And I was like joking, like, "Well, there's 64 spots in pairwise." And we don't know. This was before, obviously, the 11-game winless streak. And I think we both said, maybe low 20s. It's like, we can't imagine. We would have been flirting with the 40s.
Man.
We ended up in the mid-30s. But, yeah, at this point, again, this is November 10th. So Posch would not have been injured yet. This would have been right after the conference opener. So there would have been like 9-3, something like that. And again, we do it so early in the season because we don't want to have a show where the pairwise is really something you can look at that point. So we were really kind of going on faith in a lot of this. But you were still on St. Cloud. It was a tough choice for me, but I was out on them. But we still each had 4 NCHC teams at that point. So you went from the preseason, you had 6 teams in. Then you dropped down, or excuse me, you had 5 teams. I'm sorry. You had Denver, UND, St. Cloud Western, and CC. But you did think that you thought that you had overhyped the NCHC in the preseason. And so you were slowly shrinking your amount of teams that you were picking. My thing with St. Cloud is I put it in quotes here, a mirage. That's what I was describing them as. I said they're within a sniff. They're going to be one of the first teams out of the pairwise, but they have a history of bad second halves. And so I felt like they were going to drop off, and drop off they did. So that's what we did with the first Pick the Field show. And then we did the second Pick the Field show in early January 7th. We did both of the women's and the men's segments. You improved. I stayed the same. I still had 7 out of 11. that ended up being correct. You bumped yours up to 9 correct teams.
9. Nice.
9 times. You did especially better than me at ECAC. I had Colgate, Cornell, Quinnipiac, and Princeton. That was the whole kick-ass offense for Princeton. I was going to pick them. You were more on St. Lawrence, and they ended up making it. Again, we both had Quinnipiac. That was both wrong. I did not take St. Cloud anymore, so we both had the 4 WCHA teams. Both nailed that. For Hockey East, for both the women's Pick the Field shows, both of us had BC in both of these shows, and BC ended up crapping out. BU is actually the Hockey East representative. You picked up Penn State again, and again you were true with Sacred Heart. So you added up. You had 9. I had 7. So you win that. You win the women's side.
There we go.
You picked O'Brien as the Patty Cavs winner. And I did the big brain with Colton Kova because the East Coast bias is going to win the day.
The splitting of the votes. And
you were correct. And the committee was correct as well. They went with Casey O'Brien. I did a percent chance that the title game isn't Wisconsin and Ohio State. I had 10% chance. You had 25% chance. We were right in being optimistic that was going to be the title game. And that's how it played out. And then the men, the last Pick the Field segment for the men, I did slightly better on this one. So I had 11 correct and you stuck with 10. You still had 10 correct. But you factor in the NCHC, you getting that correct, you win the men's side too. If you add all of our receipts up, you edge me on the men's side as well as the women's side. So congratulations. For this, again, just going over bullet points. I was picking Augustana the entire time for CCHA. It's more of a bit, but you were smart and you went with Minnesota State. You went with AIC out of Atlantic for the Disney movie factor.
Yeah.
I nailed Bentley.
Close.
I said Bentley. I took Bentley and I got Bentley. For ECAC, we both picked one team out of that league. I picked Cornell. You picked Quinnipiac. They both ended up making it. So we covered the field there. We just didn't take both of them. We were both with the same 4 Big Ten schools with Minnesota, Michigan State, Michigan, and Ohio State. Penn State, at this point in the season, it should be mentioned, was I think they had maxed out as far as the lowest point in the 40s in pairwise. I mean, they started out 0-9 in conference, and they went on a run in the second half. You can say the same about UConn. I'm not sure what UConn's low point was, but at this point, early January, they would have been buried. Probably not so low as Penn State was, because Hockey East was always, all of their teams were propped up pretty high, at least in the 20s. Do you have your pairwise tracker handy?
Penn State 35.
What date is that?
That was December 8th.
That was the lowest I thought they were in the 40s at some point.
I mean, they could have if I only started after Thanksgiving.
Oh yeah, I thought it was after that was when they bottomed out. What about UConn?
UConn.
I'm gonna guess 30, maybe 25.
I have their lowest only at 20.
Okay. Well, at this point in early January, they weren't really on our radar. We both took 5 Hockey East teams. We each had Maine, BC, Providence, and Lowell. We had those 4 teams. You had New Hampshire. I picked BU. BU had just lost to Yale, which was a weird result, which I think led you to sell on BU. And I said, well, they lost the game, but they had a bunch of the guys at the World Juniors. I think they got too much talent to not make the tournament, which turned to be right. We both swung and missed on Lowell. And as it turned out, UMass and UConn were both teams that emerged in the second half from Hockey East that ended up making it. And so we each had 5 teams, and I was dithering on that. And I said quote unquote, no way Hockey East getting 6 teams in, which is exactly what happened. With the NCHC, and again, I screw this up, even though the count comes out in my favor, 11 teams correct to your 10 for this second pick the field segment. But that's factoring in that I couldn't count to 16 because I originally had 3 NCHC teams. But then when we were doing Hockey East, I realized my math was wrong. So then I'm like, well, I guess if I got to add another team, I'll put St. Cloud in there. So my original plan was not to put the Huskies in there. You had the Huskies there for an NCHC berth.
Mm-hmm.
So I originally I was planning on saying no to St. Cloud, but I did end up putting them in there. I don't know what I would have picked because I don't think I would not have picked a 6th Hockey East team, as I mentioned on the show. Maybe I would have taken a second ECAC team because we both said that I would have put St. Cloud ahead of North Dakota. You had North Dakota in the tournament, but you were more confident that St. Cloud was going to make it more than North Dakota was. We were both wrong on that.
Yeah. So
yeah, we missed the fact that Hockey East was going to do as well as they did. We both missed that ECAC was going to get a second team in. We both oversold the NCHC getting, as it turned out, just 2 teams in. We both had 4 teams for the second pick the field show. You had 5 for the first pick the field show. So there's that. We picked Hobies. You went on this whole thing. You picked Jack Devine, and then you're like, oh wait, I'm wrong. I meant to take Booyam. And then it ruined the bit because I had Booyam picked in my head anyway. I hadn't divulged that I was picking Booyam. So we ended up agreeing that Booyam was both of our Hobie pick. You said Isaac Howard as a joke would be funny. We should get Hobie finalists this week, I think.
Yeah.
The top 3. So I wouldn't be surprised if Booyam's in there, especially his regional performance this weekend, I think was a standout performance. And Devine was also a top 10 nominee as well. It's still leading the country in points. Although at that time he had just had 2 points. You mentioned that. Just had 2 points, bunch of assists. And I do think that that's going to preclude him from winning the Hobie and probably not going to get a top 3. Howard might be getting a top 3. We'll see how that all shakes out. But we always like to do these receipts shows. And again, I'll give you the win this year for sure. Because I think on both sides of both genders here, you've got the women and the men. You add it all up, you did better than me this year. So I'll get you next year. Son of a gun.
I don't think so.
Good year for you. And I will vow to be better next year.
All right. Hey, I'll take the win in this highly scientific, very non-throw in the dark, guess in the dark bit that we have. I will make an early projection right now for the first Us-Cho poll that Brown will have a vote. So if you want,
that's not much of a prediction.
If you want to go against me on that, go right ahead. But let's see what did Brown?
You should set it as the over under of 1.5 because do they get more than one vote?
No.
Does the Brown voter vote them 19th rather than 20th?
No. Ooh, maybe. No,
they could.
No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't dare, would they? Ooh,
I think they would.
That's spicy.
They might. How many wins did it get this year? Did they crack 10?
They got. Actually, they got. Wait a minute. Am I reading this right? They got 14.
I might take the over on 1.5 Us-Cho votes.
They were
14,
15, and 3.
They're a better team than St. Cloud was this year.
Very much so. Look at that. Oh, yeah. Look at all those wins that they rattle off in January. God, good for them. Oh, yeah. That'll definitely get them to a one person giving them a 20 place vote.
Well, again, I might take the over on 1.5.
All right.
The Brown voter, I'll take the over. You take the under. How about
Perfect. Sounds good. So.
Since I have the spreadsheet, I can put that down as an official.
Put that down
prediction.
as our first official prediction of the 25-26 season.
Got it.
Questions. Any names on the portal you'd like to see SCSU in on? We kind of divulged some of them on both the men and, for me, the women's side, at least, with Josie St. Martin. I would have loved to see her in the Cardinal and Black. But I'm not really looking too much at players. I never know what St. Cloud State's going to be able to do. But, as of right now, the scoring is a big thing. Defense is a big. Right now, we got a lot of holes to fill when it comes to it, especially with 2 of our defensemen leaving. So look for those replacements coming in as well. Anybody else kind of stick out specifically that you'd like to see? I mean, there's a lot of people I'd like to see.
Yeah.
On the roster, like a Zachariah Wisdom, for instance, or a Tana Lukey. Depending on however you say that.
I think it's lucky. I think it's just a short U sound.
Okay. So,
we kind of rattled off some names, kind of perusing clean sheet earlier in the show. If you want to rewind a little bit, don't know why you would, but there's that if you want, especially goaltenders. I do think that that's an area that they're going to have to address, whether or not you bring in another junior goaltender or if you go the CHL route, you're going to have to bring in a third goalie, whether that is someone that is a potential starter or literally a warm body in the Gavin Enright mold. I think that's going to be something they're going to have to get. And as you mentioned, defense, we weren't really banking on that as being a need as far as just from a numbers standpoint, but down to that might have been something you weren't budgeting for. So you might be interested in going that route for a defenseman as well. The forwards are job openings aplenty for St. Cloud offensive minded players. And that goes for the women's side as well. So you can peruse these lists. It's kind of academic to do it because of the fact that so many of these players have destinations already lined up. Like, do we spend 10 minutes to speculate on where Jamie Nelson from Mankato, where she's going in the portal, for instance, because she might have already made up her mind. So that's kind of why we don't really care to report or scoop. We're just reacting. And we're trying to analyze after moves get made.
The hot reactions.
Different skill sets. And we excel at the reaction skill set.
Excel might be a strong term.
Just look at our numbers.
Yeah. So, thoughts on Bob and his current status / fan views with the Rodents. I mean, we had a little bit of fun at his expense, but I am kind of interested may be a strong word, but it is obviously new territory for him, having to reload as often as he has to now in the Minnesota mold, where he used to have players at St. Cloud State for a little bit longer period, for 3 years or 4 years, and see them grow and develop and whatnot. Different world when you're at a program like Minnesota. So seeing, Snuggerud's gone, Matthew Wood's gone, a lot of those players. I mean, they're going to have a lot of holes to refill. They're going to be able to reload. They're going to be able to pick up people from the transfer portal, and they probably have a lot of the NIL money kind of going down. But man, there were some fiery hot takes about people upset with Motzko on Twitter, and as I've said before, you can take the Motzko out of St. Cloud, but you can't take the St. Cloud out of Motzko. The first round exit in the tournament.
I think there's a definition of karma in the dictionary. I think Motzko's photo would accompany it.
God, especially with that no call. That was just poetic right there. I don't think
several no calls as he enumerated in his post game.
I'm just focused on the overtime one.
There's a lot there, a lot to pick over.
But again, I mean, it's that same backdoor play, and you got to cover
and the third period shell, which worked to perfection against Quinnipiac. I strained to add after the Denver win, they turtled that third period against BC and just got away with it scot-free. Like this is how good Denver has just perfected the art of the randomness of the tournament. Is they can just pull that off. 2 shots on goal, and one of them was the empty netter, all period, against the high-powered BC Eagles. And Matt Davis and company, just like aces. And so, Motzko's got to look at that and just be like, what do I got to do here? But, and I was thinking, too, with like Snuggerud. I remember after his freshman year, the 2023, the Quinnipiac year, for the Gophers. Surprised that he came back for a second year after that. Yeah. Cooley was one and done. Well, Snuggerud ended up staying 3 years. I do think that's another variable with drafted players where the teams that drafted them have so much control. They're in charge, really. And I got to feel like from Motzko's perspective, you love to have a guy like him there. But in the same sense, you're really kind of taking directives from what St. Louis wants in his case. And you're at their mercy. If they want him, sure, they're going to have him. But if they're using the Gophers for Snuggerud's purposes. They're using the Gophers as free development, essentially. We feel like he's better suited developing with you and us not paying him rather than us paying him and developing in the AHL. Those dynamics are changing in the last 5 or 10 years, I think, especially when it comes to those big name programs in the Big Ten. Now, St. Cloud, especially with like Ralph, they might be getting out of that business altogether in terms of that might not be a problem St. Cloud is going to have to grapple with, for better or worse. But with those big name programs, you are sort of at the mercy of those pro teams who controls the rights of these guys. And I feel like I'm sure that Motzko is his neck's getting breathed down by a bunch of GMs. But it's a mo money, mo problems kind of situation. Like you want to step into the big time like that. Yeah. These are the kind of issues that you've got to deal with, the kind of politics that you're playing, and the sort of whack-a-mole that all these fires keep extinguishing. We saw after the game, all those guys that you rattle off, Rinzel, and all these guys bolt, and it's constant sort of rinse and repeat, right? Moore's gone. Now there's going to be a whole crop of them coming in again next year. And so that's the nature of the beast. I'm not shedding a tear for Motzko. It's just there's different dynamics at play than maybe we're used to with the Huskies. But yeah, I mean, as far as like the Twitter outrage with Motzko, if you can compare Barry with Motzko, if I was making the point with Barry last week, I didn't think that it's ridiculous that he should be on the hot seat. It's really if it's the thing is, don't take the NCAA tournament results as the most important criteria. Really, from my perspective, is make the tournament. And if you're a program with those kind of resources and that kind of recruiting pipeline, if you're making the tournament every year, like out of a 10-year time period, you're missing the tournament once. So you're making it 9 out of 10 years. And with Motzko, this is his first round defeat as Gopher coach. He had a couple more of those with St. Cloud. But he's made runs. He's made a couple of Frozen Fours. He made the national title game. And this was the first one and done for him. So, and since COVID, so he had the 2 years there where he had to clean up Lucia's mess. But since 2021, he's made the tournament every year. And they've usually been top 6 team in pairwise in each of those years. To me, I think that's enough for me to say that from that perspective, the Motzko karma aside, I don't think that track record is fireworthy. I get why Gopher fans are upset because they're irrational and they think it's natty or bust. That's never going to change, whoever the coach is. But the track record, I do think, is a little different. He's at least making the tournament every year. Barry is missing the tournament and missing tournaments in which North Dakota hosts regionals. And you're getting a Penn State kind of opportunity to sort of use your home crowd advantage to coast you into a Frozen Four opportunity. So I do think there's a bit of a difference. It would be ridiculous, I think, if Motzko was fired for cause. So, but yeah, it's those big school problems.
Yeah.
We can be envious of them, but at the same time, we can wish Bob the worst, as we normally do, and relish in his losses, as we just did.
How bad is this going to get regarding the portal? If we just become a feeder to the Big Ten, should D3 be an option for St. Cloud State? I think that's a little bit doom and gloom. As I've said earlier, I think the talent pool is just so big now and opens up so many more options that I don't feel like you're going to have situations like this, and every team's going to have situations like this where you just lose people to the portal. It'll be surprising. It'll suck, but it's just all about how you react to it. As far as going to D3, I mean, like I said earlier, like the facility and arms race and like the better weight rooms and the upgraded arenas, that used to be like the big recruiting leg up. And now like, I just don't feel D3, there's going to be a lot more that goes into play versus we can't compete with the Big Ten on NIL money. Again, this is all speculation that, one draft pick is going to go to a Big Ten school versus, any other school or whatnot. So, yeah, I don't feel like that's, I think a lot more would have to go wrong with the administration for us to even consider going to D3. I don't feel like it's that's doomsday scenario situation, obviously. But we just saw it with St. Francis, which was a D1 school that, dropped down to D3. I'm not going to say it's 100% not going to happen. But it just never crossed my eyes that that's something the St. Cloud would look at.
I don't think it's imminent. I'll say that. I mean, we're talking about existential questions about St. Cloud's long-term future. Yeah, there was another idea for a summer podcast if you want one, because we could go on for a while talking about that. For the short term, I think this is a bit of a slippery slope. Okay, we lost Colin Ralph, probably to some Big Ten schools, going to hand them some money, and then we're going to go to D. Should we just go to D3? That's a bit of a extreme step after the news of losing one guy to the portal. But obviously, this isn't just in isolation. We know of St. Cloud's financial health, which is to say it, not a very rosy one. Endowment pales in comparison to everyone else in the conference. Western Michigan on an upward trajectory on the ice. Off the ice, they're getting a new facility, which means that in a couple of years, the Herb is going to be the oldest facility in the conference and lagging significantly in that department, which will have run-on effects in terms of recruiting and trying to have an attractive program in which to bring recruits into the fold. That's only going to be a situation that continues to compound and get worse until you improve your own facilities, or God forbid you get a new facility. It seems like a pipe dream at this point.
Yeah.
Even getting the ice sheet repaired, in desperate need of upgrading, that seems to be a struggle. So yeah, there's definite issues, which are largely out of our control. Me and you, do you have that 1.3 million that you can gift the program annually?
I'd have to check a couple of
check the couch cushions. Right?
Yeah, I'd have to maybe find a cash machine quick, see if I can scrounge that up.
I mean, it's inherent with the school. It's a small school that doesn't have a law school. It doesn't have a medical school. It's not like it cranks out deep-pocketed alums on a regular basis. This was a teacher's college. It used to be called St. Cloud Normal School, St. Cloud Teachers College. Not exactly the kind of college that you picture with dollar signs in the background. So that's part of the problem, is inherently you just don't have a ton of well-endowed alums that are, John Stumpf the CEO of Wells Fargo, he was always on the list of notable alums. Well, you can check out the financial news of the last 10 years. He kind of took a bit of a dip reputationally with some scandals that he was involved in. So it's not like we've got, Richard Dean Anderson, who did he take like 3 classes at St. Cloud? And he's probably still living pretty nice on the MacGyver residuals. But joking aside, it's not like we've got a line of wealthy alumni in which we can rely upon for propping up the health of not just the university, but the hockey program. So it's definitely a conversation to have, but there's very little that me and you can do, and I'm sure our listeners are the same. It's not like, you can donate to nil collectives. That's a thing that I know some fans do. I mean, it's not something that I can really make a dent in. Like I can make contributions, but it's not going to change the landscape in any significant way. So this is kind of what we do to give back, at least if we can pique some interest, keep the program relevant in terms of we want something that people are invested in.
Digital footprint.
Yeah. Cranking out some content to keep the conversation going. It's a very small contribution, we know, but that's as much as we can do. As far as, is this going to be the end of the D1 era? I think that's years and years and years away, and I hope it never comes, obviously. But it just, instead of thinking, okay, Ralph leaves, someone else is going to pay him money that we don't have, should we just close up shop? Instead of that being the next step, how about the next step is somewhere in the middle of that extreme of, okay, maybe this is now we're getting out of the market of players that are going to get drafted in the NHL draft. Like that might be a more reasonable next step in terms of our recruiting should be targeted to a different group of players rather than guys that are expected to go to the World Juniors or that might get drafted in the NHL draft. Like you can have a successful program with that as your recruiting philosophy. It's not like we have to ape the Big Ten recruiting footprint and try to beat the Big Ten schools at the recruiting game because you're never going to win that game. So I feel like you can adapt. I think I do. I mean, Larson's been active in the portal. The one thing I don't want coaches, like I saw last year, I think it was, the Virginia basketball coach, who I think is Tony Bennett, not the crooner, but won a national title with them, but he quit abruptly last year, and he cited the changing landscape in college sports. He didn't want to deal with the portal. Didn't feel like it was the way college sports were meant to be. I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but that was the thrust of his rationale of hanging it up. I respect his move. If you're not fully invested, if you don't fully believe in, if you consider the portal with contempt and avoid it out of some sort of righteousness, you should get out of the sport. You should leave that to others who are more motivated to do that. With Larson, he's not shied away from interacting with the portal and trying to adapt to the new landscape of college hockey. That's all I can hope for with the coach when it comes to the portal. At least have an open mind to it. You have to know how to navigate those kind of things because, as we mentioned, every team's going to have effects here. Teams with players going in and coming out. So at least have a coach that's willing to check it out, not be doom and gloom whenever they lose guys. And at least his track record, he's been willing and able to make transactions through the portal. So I'm not going to make any big, major, definitive statements on the portal season because we're 2 days into it. But once all the dust settles, we can see how it all played out. And I do hope, and I'll put my faith that Larson is at least going to participate, and we'll see how well he does. But that's where I'm going to go next. Not let's cut the program. I want to play this portal season out at least. See how St. Cloud comes out of it.
Yeah. Exactly. So, that about does her on this episode.
About does her.
So we'll be back next week, and we got a fun show lined up. We'll get some Herbie nominations, I think, out there, and kick off some voting, maybe as well. And remember how it goes. The fans get a vote, and then each Andrew and myself get a vote as well, and then majority rules. I can't remember though. I think for the Lowell Sun Foot and Mouth Award, we just picked on our.
That one's just gonna be a picked one, and we've
Yeah.
got to settle on that. But we'll have an off air production meeting on that. But
I know you guys are waiting with bated breath on that one, so
it is a fun award.
it's one of my favorites. If I'm going to be completely honest, so just to relive, and we got some good nominees. So
It's a tight field this year.
And until next time. Hey, I'm Weldie at More Clappers, MOAR, More Clappers. Andrew, you can find him at
Andrew SCSUHHP, and also email Huskies Hockey Podcast at gmail.com.
send him an email. So, perfect. Until next time, go Huskies.
Woo!